Boom. And we are live. I am joined by Zach Ramey, friend, colleague, really just someone who motivates me to do better. How are you doing today, sir? I appreciate you coming on the show again.
Man, long time no hear from, as we like to say, Max. Thank you for those kind words. Definitely feel the same way about your pod. Consider you a partner, a brother in this podcasting thing. Great guy. So definitely always excited when we get to, share the same space in this podcasting world. So I'm excited to be here.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. And it's been such a cool thing to see because, like you said, we both, I don't feel like I'm even close to where I want to be. And I know you have such high aspirations and goals too, but from where we've started to now, it's like we almost started the journey and the process together. So every time I see you do well, and it's like we take part in, like, we have a draft show coming up, it's so cool to see because I feel like it's like we're in the 2003 draft class. Like we're starting our career together.
Yeah, and it's dope because you look at people around you, and I think even with yourself, sometimes you have such high expectations. Like you said, we're the same. You could kind of miss the forest from the trees, and you're counting the home runs, but you're not looking at the base hits that you're getting. And to see where we are, and I know for myself, this is only my third season, and the connections I've made and the people I've made along the way. And, it's funny, I'll share this real quick. People not recently, but we'll say recently, been asking me, like, how did we meet, or how did I meet Rashad Phillips? How did you meet Rashad? Like, how did that happen? And I tell them, like, it's really nothing special. Like, all I did was reach out to him, like thousands other people I reached out to in this space, and he just happened to be one of the people that responded. And from there, meeting him, and then things kind of happening in the universe for how he met Perk, that was pure happenstance, and them developing a relationship. And because of that, I'm actually getting to have Perk on my show and develop a relationship with Kendrick Perkins, and finding out that somebody that he does business with, the guy I had on my podcast, Rich Gray, that a lot of people don't even know who that is, went to college with my best friend. So I say all that to say this: you never know what the universe or the world has in store for you. All you can control is what's in front of you. Do you have a blueprint? Do you have a plan? Are you working to make that stuff achieve? And then everything else will kind of take care of itself. You don't have to worry about what everybody else is doing and trying to compare yourself, or as we like to say, keep up with the Joneses, etc.
Right.
And you'll be surprised. And it's like, here we are. And for me personally, I started Twitter with 0 followers because me and my wife, when we got married, we agreed to get off of social media. So I hadn't had social media over 5 years. The last time I had social media, like Instagram, was just adding video content. So
man,
think about how long ago and how much the world has changed since then.
Right.
So for me to see that I'm almost at 700, people like, that's not a lot. Some people, depending on how they look at it, I'm like, man, that's incredible, because it's strictly me building this podcast, building my brand, and building just in general that we're out here, man. So, it's phenomenal, man. It's phenomenal.
That's so cool. One thing you and I have we have in common is just the drive. And I feel like you are always striving to do better, to be better, different. You're very innovative, what you talk about, how you talk about things, your content. And we've learned both so much from Rashad, but I really do learn so much from you. And I think that's what is so cool, is when you find people who have that same drive. That's who I surround myself with. My brother from another mother, that's my guy. He just got an internship at NASA. And it's like, I have to do, and he's an athlete.
Yeah, right.
And so for him to make that transition so seamlessly, I'm like, now I got to do better. And so it's like, you make each other better, and that's so cool. And it's so funny. So I have a funny story. The way I met Rashad too was I saw him on The Herd, and The Herd I listen to every day. I'm like, man, that guy's so cool. Like, he was just such a real dude. So I'm like, let me look him up on Instagram. I look him up. I'm like, all right, let me have him on the show. Let me reach out. He probably won't answer. Let me reach out. So I reached out and he answered. I was like, oh, wow. And then immediately I got so excited. This was really when I first started. And I was like, oh, man, when do you want to do it? We can do it today if you want. And he's like, man, he's like, let me know when you can. I'll let you know. I can't just do it right now. And I was like, okay, my bad. So then the first time I ever interviewed him, I was in the car and I was actually driving. I probably shouldn't even admit this, but I was driving to an event to do a commentating event, but I did not want to miss the opportunity to interview Rashad Phillips. So I'm like, oh, man, but this is the only time he can do it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make it work. And so I was driving to an event while I interviewed him. And then ever since then, it kind of just, wow, like you said, it's like you connect the dots. And I'm like, oh, wait, he covers the Orlando Magic. I can cover the Orlando Magic. Oh, we can cover the games together. And like, it just clicked. It's so funny how that works, but it all started with that ambition and that drive to reach out and not be scared to fail.
Yeah, and just having your own plan. Yeah. Like, it's not getting caught up in everything else, just having your own plan. And I've been saying this a lot because it's been a lot of stuff going on. But, you know, Nipsey Hussle was somebody, even before he passed. You know, it's fascinating. You know, that's another example, like, of giving people their flowers while they're here, because it was amazing when he passed how iconic he became and how everybody was into his music. But I remember being one of the few people that listened to his stuff early on and listened to the stuff he was saying. And he just says, you know, so simple, like sometimes you got to just stick to your script. You know, you might get it in the time frame that you want, but if you just stick to your script, like everything else will take care of itself. And that's how he came up with the name, the Marathon, the brand. And, you know, it's not a sprint, it's a long race. And I look back at it now, and just these last few months since I left my last job, my last career move, finally having confidence in myself and understanding what my purpose. So now you could look back on things that helps you get to where you are, and it's just like, man, it's so cool. Like, not even like kind of like a nerdy standpoint. Like, man, this is so cool. Like, to see how all this worked together. And you, at the time, you really had no idea. You just knew, like, I want to get Rashad on my show.
Yeah.
And he ended up getting on your show. And then it's another example. I think when we get into this podcasting space, everybody want to buy all the top-notch equipment or make everything perfect. But one thing you can always control is your content. And you can work yourself up. Like, now I have one of the top-of-the-line mics, but when I started out, I didn't have that kind of equipment. I had a simple little mic plugged into a simple little recorder, and then we just get going, and then who knows where it goes from there. So that's just an example of you coming up with a way to be able to get it done, and you got it done, and look where you are now.
Right. I appreciate that. I want to transition into this because you are a true historian, and I said this when I promoted the episode this morning. I'm like, it's not even just about basketball, because you know more basketball than anyone when it comes to the history of it. But just in life, like, I'm just following you on Twitter and just kind of having conversations with you off air. You're very intellectual, and like, you really break things down. The way when the pandemic first happened, I remember I spoke to you when I was up in North Carolina visiting my mom, and just the way you broke that down, and like maybe how things are evaluated, how things are shared, information. You're very intellectual, so you have a completely different approach to everything that's going on in the world today. And I'm not in the position where I can always relate either, and I don't want to act like I can. But all I can do is support and do anything I can to contribute and change. So for you, how has everything been as far as just the social injustice and then with the return of sports? Has it been overwhelming? Like, how have you processed everything as far as someone who breaks down information the way you do? Like, the times that we're in right now are so hard. It's such a hard year, but I think that's also sometimes when things demand change and bright things come out of it. So how would you kind of describe everything that's going on right now?
For me, I always been able to take the approach of looking at things on different layers. So, like, while everything is working together, all of it is not the same. So I give you an example. When the players boycotted, people were like, they're going back to play. Like, what did that accomplish? Like, that didn't accomplish anything. Like, they're just athletes. In the grand scheme of things, they're probably right. But for that moment and everything that's going on, no, it was something that needed to be done. And when I say in the grand scheme of things, it's going to take more than just a boycott. But what people missed was this can possibly, when we look back in history, because we don't know, it's kind of going back to the piece we just shared about our own journeys. You don't know what actually gets the ball rolling, right? We don't know what gets the ball rolling in this situation as far as to social injustice. But for me, I hate to say it, Max, it's been confirmation for a lot of other people. For somebody whose degree is technically in social science, but is really history with a concentration in history, I've always coined myself as a cool nerd. even as a kid, one of my favorite games was Trivial Pursuit. I just love information, just love knowledge.
Right.
So for me, just transitioning to a historian, the books I have in my closet, the books my wife has, like our library is, at our age, don't too many people have this kind of library because my wife's background is political science. And then she was naturally like that as a child. So I've read too much. I've studied too much. So I said on a post on Instagram, like, this year has been the year of everybody being uncomfortable. Like, you can't hide from certain things anymore because of social media, because of technology. We're all joined together now. So at some point, the rubber's going to have to meet the road, and we're going to really start to see what side people on and how people view certain things. But for me, Max, in a nutshell, it's been confirmation. What's been going on to black people, people of color in this country, this is nothing new. This is what the country is founded on. It's founded on a lot of great, in theory, principles, but then we know those principles depend on what your skin color is because we're dealing with the race dynamic. And it's always been like that. You know, I said this to a gentleman earlier, that I don't care how many branches grow off a tree and how far those branches get away from that main center part of the tree, it's still part of the same tree. And at the end of the day, this is what the United States was founded on. And I think for a lot of people, it's been a tough pill to swallow. As a historian, those of us like that are black, obviously, we look at the Voting Rights Act of 64, the Civil Rights Act 65. We look at different things, and we thought for us, the battle was over, so to speak. And yeah, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've made a lot of progression. You know, a lot of opportunities have opened up. But by and large, and what my last career showed me, because I lived in the city and I worked in such a dynamic where you'll have $1 million mansion on this block, but 2 blocks over, you have a gang conflict going on. So I saw the haves versus the have-nots literally up close. Like, literally, Obama's house is right here. 2 blocks over, one of my former teammates got killed. Like, that's the reality of where I was. So you start to realize that, yeah, in theory, we made a lot of progression, but for a lot of black people, that's just not the case.
Right.
And for a lot of black people, everything is not going to be attainable the same way. So just because Oprah or Jay-Z did it, the odds are you're not going to do it the same way you're doing it. So I think, in a nutshell, to tie it all together, for me, it was confirmation. This is the year of being uncomfortable. This should be the year of studying, understanding what's really going on, and what to demand from a candidate, and then let's have an honest look at our country. And then I think what's forcing a lot of people who are not black to do, look at it through our eyes.
Right.
You know, just to share something real quick, if we even look at politics, and it's not about who you support and why and all that. I'm just saying this to make a point. If you look at it just from a historical standpoint as black people, look who our 2 choices are for president. Mm-hmm. We got the current regime, who's trying to take us back to pre-Civil War with his rhetoric and people falling in line with that. So he's like a open racist. But then if we, as a historian, if we look at the history of who Biden and Kamala Harris is, they helped usher in, he wrote the bill, the crime bill of 91 for 3 strikes and ushered in mass incarceration. And she was a prosecutor in California. So she could have easily been a defense attorney, but she was a prosecutor that helped prosecute a lot of black men.
Right.
And it's not these are our choices as a black person. You know, it's just fascinating to me. And I don't think people really understand that dynamic. And I'm not here to speak ill because I know how we normally vote as a people. We usually vote Democrat. I'm not here. I'm just stating the facts. You can go look it up. But these are these tough decisions and these tough conversations we got to have. These are our 2 candidates. And we have to ask ourselves, as they say, what's the lesser of the 2 evils? So for me, all this is just kind of one big pile of gumbo, one big stew. And for me, I already knew this stuff was going on, but for a lot of people, it's been confirmation.
I appreciate you sharing that the way you did. Like, I've never really heard anyone break it down the way you just did. And like I said, that's just from your intellectual perspective, the way you break things down. I feel right now, as someone who, in the position I'm in, as a younger generation, I'm a young man in this, I'm trying to do as much as I can to create a new way of thinking. So anytime I can contribute in that way, I really try my best to do that. And one thing I noticed with sports, like you said, now I thought what Milwaukee did, the Milwaukee Bucks, was incredible. And then just the fact that they used their platform, and then ultimately the players having a meeting to ultimately utilize their leverage and then say, hey, we need to put pressure on the owners. Let's see. We saw what Robert Kraft did when he met Meek Mill and he liked him. He has connections. He has leverage. He was able to help get him out. So they were putting pressure on these owners to, hey, use your leverage, use your money, use your connections. Let's demand change. And I thought that was amazing. And I said, even if they don't play, I get it. And now that they decided to play, they now have their platform on TV to speak what they want to speak about. Has sports now more than ever, because Muhammad Ali is my favorite athlete of all time. He did this. Do you think sports now is, or maybe it always has been, but it's on display now, like you said, 2020 is kind of the case of study, is the bridge between what needs to change and the people that you need to talk to change it? Like, has sports become more vital in society today than it's ever been? Because I don't ever remember that. I mean, I'm also younger, but it just seems like sports is kind of like the bridge between life and the people that can make a change.
I mean, if we do to check the history real quick, it's always been that way. Because for the black community, by and large, those of us who are successful economically are your athletes and your entertainers.
Right.
So they're going to be in positions to meet and rub elbows and bump shoulders with certain people that the average black person is not going to be able to do.
Right.
I would say back during the civil rights, you had people in the religious sector. So obviously you had King, Christian, you had Malcolm X, a Muslim, you had, those kind of people who had that kind of voice back then. That's a little bit different than now. But I think sports has always been that bridge because of the dynamics of who in our culture makes most of the money. And at the end of the day, this is a capitalistic society. And those who make the money are the ones who have the power and influence. So I think for them also, too, people forget they've been in this bubble. They said the Lakers, I read somewhere, it was a Lakers post. They've been in the bubble like 58 days, away from their family, away from
That's
their
a lot.
friends. That's a long time to be anywhere, let alone you see on TV what you came down there to fight and try to use your voice for. You see another black man get shot by the police. Like, how did you think that was going to affect them? So at the end of the day, I agree with you. Even if they didn't play, I got it. But I also know big picture, it's still economics. If they don't play, they miss out on a lot of money. And then what's not also being publicized, I've heard like from different feeds, people don't understand how many jobs that NBA bubble created for the common person. Because, again, people don't understand what kind of economic structure we have in this country as far as capitalism. We are a service-based economy, meaning we, by and large, don't produce anything. So if people are not able to go out and work and provide services, then they don't work.
Right.
And that's what the bubble brought. So it wasn't just if we close this down as players, it was going to be a sacrifice. But then even some of the players, if you use perspective, everybody's not making what LeBron makes in salary on the court, or your top James Harden or Russell Westbrook. These guys depend on a check 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, like the average person.
Right.
They say, well, they're millionaires. They should learn how to, manage their money. That's not realistic, Max. You're not going to make a certain amount of money and then drive some do a Honda Civic, for example, and live in $100,000. That's just not realistic. So it was all these dynamics at play. But to your point, sports has always been that bridge. But I will caution with this. They make more money now than ever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always very uneasy when you get to throwing around the Ali comparisons, because I don't think people really understand what Ali gave up.
Yeah, he wasn't making as much as the LeBrons.
No, and if it wasn't for the Nation of Islam, you could feel how you feel about them, but this is just a historical thing. If it wasn't for them backing him up financially, he wouldn't even have. Who knows where Ali would have been.
He was running out of money at one point.
He was running out of money. He literally gave up the title. Think about it. That would be like LeBron or Steph, for these guys winning the championship, MVP.
In their prime.
In their prime, and then they're telling you, nah, you can't play because you don't want to go to war.
Yeah.
Religious. And I mean, people, I don't think, you have to be careful, because the further you get away from history, we kind of throw around terms, and I'm not, throwing judgment. I just think we have to be careful.
Be careful of everything.
When you start saying certain things and comparing certain people, and even using the words like sacrifice and activist, because it's not the same thing per se.
That's a great point. People forget that. When he was in his prime, it was more of the hit and go, the footwork, the speed, how fast he was, and then kind of towards the end is when he developed that rope-a-dope style, and because he lost a lot of that speed.
Lost 3 years.
Yeah, that's his prime.
He lost 3 years, and, people like Ali, Oscar Robinson with free agency in the NBA, Kurt Flood in baseball, like these were guys who, big picture, lost a lot of things while they were protesting. Jackie Robinson, Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So, it's always been hand in hand. I think more than now, because of the brand building and the economic impact they have on the whole economic structure, I think they can really flex a lot of power. Or what we're going to see is, do these people who have these kind of power in politics and in business, do they really value racism and social injustice? I'm going to say this again. Do they value racism and social injustice, or do they value their bottom line? Because it can get to a point that if these guys who are really about bringing in revenue and brands say, hey, we're just not going to do this, then we're going to really see where these people really ultimately stand. And I think that's what the players have realized. Even with LeBron, I don't think he gets near enough credit. He gets more criticism with the player empowerment movement. Just realizing that we're brands, people come to watch us play. So I'm going to make the decision that best suits me and my family, even Kevin Durant, whether you agree or not, because I've earned that right. I'm the one who's bringing in the revenue. This is capitalism, and it is what it is. So I agree with you 100%.
Right. I want to transition, though, into the actual game of basketball. So we're going to disagree with a couple things, and I can't wait to get into it.
We always do.
I love it. I love it.
I'm going to disagree. I love it.
So, all right, first off, my first topic, though, is I'm watching Donovan Mitchell. I'm watching Jamal Murray, who I know you're both very high on both of them. And then Jamal Murray shows flashes of, like you said, just all-NBA talent. But it's like, God, I just want you to make sure you always keep that approach, because when you keep that approach, you're unstoppable. And then Donovan Mitchell, the way he's developed, even you could tell he's been working on his perimeter game, that three-point shot. It looks so fluid now. Why do you think, one, shooting percentages have gone up, and two, why do you believe young stars are really kind of thriving in this environment? Because not that they wouldn't thrive before with the regular crowd, but it seems like now it's like, okay, like it's just on display. The way Luka's been balling, the way Donovan's been balling, the way Jamal's been balling, Jason Tatum's been balling, Jaylen Brown. Why do you think the young stars are thriving more?
I think one is the arena, the backdrop.
Okay.
And I've heard this said, so I'm not breaking news. I've heard other basketball players say this. I didn't get to play in arenas a lot. I didn't have that kind of career. But it is a difference going from an arena to like a gym or area like how they got the Disney complex completely blacked out around. So the shooting percentages are going to go up. Two, you're shooting in the same gym, right? So whatever happened the game before and the game before that, it carries over because you're playing in one or two venues. I think they only have two venues that they're actually playing games. So you have the familiarity with the court and with the rims. That stuff matters. The next thing is you're not traveling, right? So literally you're walking across campus, taking a bus or a short bus ride across campus. You're not traveling, so you're getting a different level of rest that you might not get normally because of the planes and all the early morning shootouts, shoot-arounds and things of that nature. And then lastly, I said this generation, talent-wise, is just better.
Steve Kerr said it a while ago. Things get better over time.
You can't, at this level, if you mentioned a Jason Tatum, who had a trainer, a professional trainer, so I think like 8 or 9. You know, Donovan Mitchell, I think his name was Chris Brinkley, the guy that from New York that kind of became, famous recently with the blackout runs or whatever he calls them. There's a lot of great trainers. I'm just using him as an example because I know Donovan uses him as well. But even the way they're training, I have enough of an eye. I can see the workouts when he's doing his maneuvering through the pick and roll and how he's shielding off the defender. So I think it's all of that. The players nowadays are just more skilled. It is what it is. Now, this is the thing I will say. I feel like their approach or not necessarily knowing how to execute their skill is what's missing from the older game. because the older guys got more reps because you went to college, you stayed in college long.
Right, more refined.
Yeah, and it's just certain things, even off the court in life, you're only going to get better with experience. You can't even necessarily always put it in words. It's just, I experienced this, I know what not to do, and it's the same thing with basketball.
And I agree.
Basketball.
Okay, now this is the one thing I want to see, and I tweeted this. I said, God, I refer to Twitter a lot. So this is one thing I said, though. I was like, I want to see them take pride in getting a stop. Like, both of them are dropping 40, 50 points, but I feel like, and usually I stick up for the younger generation, but I'm kind of going to vouch for the older generation. I feel like they took more pride in, oh, you're not going to score. Like, I don't want to shut you down. And I know the way the game is played now and the officiating, it's probably harder to do that with no hand check and being less physical. But is that something you want to see more of? Like, I want to see Jamal say, you know what, I'm tired of Donovan dropping 40 a game. Let me see if I can get him to maybe 25 or vice versa. Because, I mean, Jamal scored, 20-something points in the fourth quarter last night alone again. It's like, where is the pride in defense?
I think, again, I started off the conversation by saying, I don't care what you look at, this is all multi-layered.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things at work. So, again, I think the skill level is incredible, right? The court is spread out, so the rotations are harder. I even said this to my man P-Mac, Paul McPherson. I always tell people when I go YouTube his highlights, and you'll see why I say he was Zion Williamson before we even knew who Zion was. Go look that guy up. But I was just telling him, and I've said this before on a tweet, defense nowadays is harder. It is, because if you're somebody that has to fight over the pick and roll, multiple picks while you're being screened, and then depending on the play and the ball movement, sprint to the opposite corner to pick up a shooter, the rotations are just longer.
Yeah.
It's just harder. Versus if we throw on a game from the 80s, early 90s, everybody's around the paint.
That's true.
Yeah. So now it might be more physical. So you're talking about a difference in how we view what's hard and what isn't. But I will argue that it's just different. It's still hard. It's just a different type of hard. So instead of you playing through contact and getting beat down, it might be tired from that. I think as a defender, especially somebody like me that was a point guard, I couldn't even imagine. It's almost like the guys in the NBA are playing like how I played overseas when I played in some of these lower levels, and you're the only American, and you're literally looked at to do everything. So guard the best player, play make. Like Donovan and Jamal Murray have to play make. Kawhi has to play make. Even LeBron has to play make. But then come back on the other end against high-level elite NBA talent and say you got to play defense.
Yeah, you got to pick your spots.
To your point, I agree. I think the game has come down to you getting key stops. And sometimes I would like to see them take that challenge and have that mentality that doesn't really exist today, like a Jordan who will literally sit down, or Kobe who will literally sit down, pull up his shorts, or Dwayne Wade, all those guys, a Dennis Johnson from the 80s that would, Sidney Moncrief, sit down and really pull up them shorts and want to get a stop. I think they need to do that. But in this era of people really playing basketball how the game should have been played, to me, which means no positions, because when it was created, it's a simple game. You can dribble, you can score. You got to stop the other team from scoring. And that's what we've been seeing. There's no more restrictions on you're a center or this. No, you're a basketball player. So if you can make plays, you get to make plays. So to your point, that's how I will answer that question. I think it's a combination of everything that we're seeing. And I don't think people really realize that because we're kind of stuck in our ways, whether it's new school versus old school. But there's differences on each level. But certain things, as we progress, it's just better. It is what it is.
Right. Now, this is the disagreement we're going to get into. Now, I think I have Lakers beating Houston because of the size, and we can break that down another time. We have, I think, Clippers. I think Denver's a tough matchup for them. If Denver ultimately wins, I think Utah can present some problems. But Miami and Milwaukee are two things I think you and I will get into. So I know you were really high on Milwaukee beginning the season. Giannis was your MVP, and I understand that completely. I have Miami beating them. I think they're going to not necessarily shock the world, because it's not like they're just not good. I just think it's going to be an upset. And I have Miami winning. I think if you put Bam on Giannis, I feel like if you stop Giannis, which is obviously easier said than done, But if you're able to kind of contain that in a way where you make it difficult for him, he's going to get his, make it difficult. You're asking other role players to step up, and that's kind of out of their role. And I said Chris Middleton, PJ Tucker, and Kyle Kuzma were some of the three most pivotal players in the playoffs because you know what you're getting with the star players, but they need to step up. You have Milwaukee winning that series, but do you think it's a tough series? Do you have it in 5, 6, 7? How do you see that series playing out?
I have it in 7.
Okay.
And the reason why I stuck with Milwaukee, because I don't like flip-flopping picks. Like,
Right.
I like to just kind of pick, and however it plays out, if I was wrong, I was wrong. If I was right, I was right. But Miami's been one of my other favorite teams. I mean, You follow me, I talk about Miami. I got to cover them. I talked to Eric Spoelstra, talked to Bam, talked to Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn. Couldn't be more impressed by those young men, especially Bam. Just really impressed by him as a young man. Spoke well, very articulate, understands himself, understands what he needs to work on. So I can see Miami doing it. Like, and if we wanted to play the major media game, I probably would have picked Miami over Milwaukee because I said this in a tweet or a podcast. I can't remember now. The days seem to be running together, but how Spo, if you think Spo is not going to figure out ways to get Duncan Robinson in action, who unlocks a lot for their offense because of his shooting ability, and as somebody that's seen him in person, he's taller than people realize.
Yep.
Miami in general has one of the
lengthier
wing type players. They have so many of those guys on their roster, so they offer so many different matchups. And the fact that Jimmy Butler has really found a home there, he's playing at a different pace, picking his spots. Like you said, Bam is the wild card. But if you think they're not going to expose this bend-don't-break approach that Milwaukee has towards defense with dropping Brook and Robin and those other guys in the paint off these three-point shooters, you got another thing coming because they just did that. Orlando had success with Nikola Vucevic. That's why he was able to just go crazy because they were just going to allow him to shoot those jump shots. The difference is I don't know if you can survive Miami doing that. And then the question comes down to, again, in fairness to Bledsoe this year, he did have COVID. He did get down there later. Got to get the legs.
Right. Got to adjust.
The question is, what do we get from Bledsoe? What are we going to get from Pat Connaughton, who's in the same boat as Bledsoe? Is Dante DiVincenzo ready this year? Chris Middleton seems to have found his legs. And the other thing, too, I said about Milwaukee, I felt like Middleton, just using perspective, and it shows you I would say there's levels to this, right? So just because Chris Middleton might not be at the highest level doesn't mean he didn't deserve all NBA this year. Doesn't mean his 50, 40, 90 was less impressive. It just means he's not on Kawhi or certain guys' level.
Yeah, there's tiers.
Yeah, so I felt like last year the fact that he had to guard Kawhi, and even with Giannis's greatness, and I said his greatest skill is actually his aggression, not so much skilled basketball player. Because I said, I posed this on my podcast. Is he the first player since like Moses Malone where aggression is like his main thing? Because you can name 5 or 6 other guys off the top of your head who's probably better skill-wise than he is, but he's still the most dominant and the MVP. You know what I'm saying? So Chris Middleton offers something that Giannis can't do, which is create his own shot far shooting a consistent jump shot.
Yeah,
so I feel like with him not having to guard Kawhi this year, he should be able to pull that off, and that's why I ultimately still lean towards Milwaukee.
Okay. No, that's fair, and that's a great point. I like that. It's just a dog mentality, that chip on his shoulder that he has, and he gets that also because he wasn't a star right away. He had to earn everything he got. He's been blessed with this athleticism, but he's worked. Like, you could tell he's been overlooked. He was underrated, and that's something you don't just get. There's a reason why that's usually formed or why you always have it, like Tom Brady drafted 6th round.
Even in society, not to cut you off, like, if you think about it big picture, aggression is kind of frowned on nowadays. Like, that's not what we tend to do, like we used to do, like when I was coming up, and it's a good thing because when I was coming up, some of the things that was said on TV or vice versa wouldn't fly in today's society.
Right.
What we evolved, we matured. But for Giannis, that aggression part
helps him.
It just plays into it. It helps him. I mean, again, I had to think about it. Moses Malone, who doesn't get talked about, the late great, 3 MVPs, championship, finals MVP. All he came to do was just dog you out, as my father-in-law would say. He'll be throwing it off the backboard, just going to get it. Not a lot of
dog
hooks, just dog you out, and that's what Giannis does, and it suits him well for this era. It really does.
Zach, I appreciate your time. One of the last things I really want to get at with you is I've compared the Boston Celtics as a technical boxer. Yeah. So I was like, they're not George Foreman. Like, I thought Milwaukee was George Foreman. Like, if he hits you, if Giannis is a powerhouse, you're done. You're getting knocked out. He knocked out Joe Frazier, even though Joe Frazier beat Ali. Like, it was just a thing. But I think Boston Celtics is more of a technical boxer. They can hit you with the jab, the footwork, the movements. Boston, at halftime the other night, had 4 people in double digits right away. I mean, you have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, you have Kemba, Marcus Smart was hitting shots. I just think they have a variety of ways to beat people. But Toronto, I could argue, it may be the best coach team, but also matches up so well with so many different people defensively with their switches. Van Vliet, who's an emerging star, Siakam. How do you see that series playing out? Because to me, that is like basketball at its finest. It's like there's just so many, it's such well-rounded teams going at it. It may not have even though Jason Tatum, you can argue, is going to be that guy one day, it doesn't have a Giannis, doesn't have a LeBron, doesn't have a Kawhi, so it may not get the attention that everyone else is getting. But to me, as far as pure basketball, these two teams are as good as it gets. How do you see that going out? Because obviously, I had Boston coming out of the East, so I'm rolling with Boston.
No, I think it's going to be like we've seen with Utah and Denver as far as that back and forth, like adjustments are going to be made. So it won't surprise me if Toronto gets this game and then back and forth. The thing that I'm cautious with Boston is their depth as they go forward.
Right.
So I can see them getting past Toronto, but I can see Toronto getting past them, vice versa. But I can see them getting past Toronto. But let's say they get to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now you got to face a Milwaukee or Miami.
You need a spark.
And then when you get to the finals, the Clippers, Lakers, looming large, Rockets with their explosiveness on offense and on defense. I looked it up. I couldn't believe it. James Harden is second in defensive rating.
He's playing some defense, yeah.
Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what is going on here? So that lack of Haywood, right? And I think what I loved about Haywood overall, even before the injury, was his basketball IQ and knowing just how to play and fill in spots and having that ability to play at an all-star, all-NBA level.
Smart
with
dude.
His size.
Yeah.
And like you said, availability is the best ability sometimes. With him not being there,
it hurts.
That can affect their rotation and just what you can potentially get out of him. Because regardless of how he's been since the
horrific injury he had, yeah.
Yeah, right, thank you. He's not what he used to be, but at the same time, teams weren't going to just leave him open either. You still have to. He's still a threat on the court. And that's my only caution with the Celtics is as you go deeper, that means you have to go deeper in your bench because he's not there. And as the competition rises, we'll see what happens. So I caution that. But I think this series, either way, just like I think we have Milwaukee and Miami, Boston and Toronto, it can go either way. And it would surprise me if both of these series go 7 games.
I love it. I want to end with this. You got the fresh WNBA jacket on. You're growing out the beard. You got the headphones. Yep. I see it. You're looking fresh, bro. I think this quarantine has benefited you.
Yep. Because of COVID, I ordered this hoodie like almost a month ago, so it took forever for it to finally get here. But, definitely, like I said, it's been a time of just reflection, reinvention of myself, growth, maturity. Even with my marriage, wasn't always perfect. Making sure I'm supporting my wife better, just being transparent. Am I being the kind of father model for my son? Am I being the kind of father and man that my daughter will want to grow up and marry and ultimately meet? So for me, I just really feel like this pandemic was a time for people who could and should, everybody, even if you weren't working the best of your ability, just be still. And just be present and just reevaluate because we were so go. But this pandemic forced you to be still. And for me, I use this time perfectly to be still and then as the the slang word to level up. And I feel like I've been doing that. I feel like you've been doing it. And I really feel like on the backside of things, I don't think you need adversity to get better in life, because who wants to go through things all the time?
Right.
But at the same time, you're going to probably go through some adversity in life. And then to close with this, depending on what your race is in this country, you're going to go through way more than other people. It's just a fact. So, teaching my children and others, you got to learn how to be comfortable in an uncomfortable environment. It's just that simple.
Zach, I couldn't thank you enough. I really appreciate you not only coming on my show, giving me your time. Like, you have so many different responsibilities and obligations. So every time you come on the show, I appreciate it. And I can honestly say I cannot wait to keep going forward and building with you the inner circle and what that's becoming. And it's only going to get better. So I feel like kind of in a funny way, it's almost like a Larry Bird, Magic Johnson in a nice way. It's like going forward, this is us early in the early stages of college, and then it kind of goes up and it goes up and it goes up. So I think it's gonna be a lot of fun, and I appreciate it, Zach. I really do.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Max. We're always, again, like I said, I always tell people they should follow you. I was talking with Combo, our good friend Combo from Court, and how you're so good. I don't even think you understand how good you are. So I just wanted to let you know, keep doing what you're doing, keep building. I always tell people you're knowledgeable about sports, but if you are a fight person, you need to have your podcast. If you're a UFC, a boxing person, you need to add that to your library, because the work you do in that field is phenomenal. So just continue to keep doing what you're doing, Max.
I appreciate that. I really do. Thank you, Zach. Now, before I let you go, where can they find you? Where are they subscribing to your podcast? All the above. Social media, where can they get you?
The podcast, the website is www.theofftheglasspodcast.com. The link to the podcast is on the front page. Also, I launched it today through Teespring. Everybody's using Teespring, but we have some merch available. So, hit the website, get you a hoodie, get you a T-shirt. The Patreon, if you want to support the pod, people have been doing that. I appreciate that. Is the Off the Glass Podcast on the Patreon page. YouTube channel, the Off the Glass Podcast. And last but not least, social media. I'm always on Twitter engaging, Zach at the Off the Glass. And then my Instagram is Zach the Off the Glass Podcast. So make sure to follow me there. I follow back. I engage. Make sure to support. I appreciate all the support. And I appreciate you, Max, for allowing me to come on your platform and share. I really do. It means a lot. Thank you.
All right, Zach. Thank you, man. You have a great and safe day, and we'll talk soon.
Talk soon.